Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my cheesy co-host, Brett.
Cheesy. I love your shirt, by the way. It's great.
Thank you.
I assume that's what you're referring to.
Oh, I was. I'm wearing an I Heart Cheese shirt, but the heart is a cheese, just for those of you who are not viewing it.
Real quick, this is the most people we've ever had who wanted to ask questions, so we're actually full right now, so you're going to have to wait if you're trying to join.
It's okay. We'll actually try to get through these questions.
Drop off, we'll add people in.
You know, it would have been helpful if I wasn't late.
It's true. Would have been. But I wasn't judging. I wasn't going to say it.
But I will not leave early. I'm just going to be here all night until your questions are answered, everybody.
That's right. We're answering questions. Anything you want to know about the current cases that are going on, or really Alice's favorite cheese, whatever it is you want to ask. My favorite people are the people who hate the fact that people ask us things that aren't related to cases. So if I were you, those are the questions I would ask tonight. Like the most mundane, untrue crime questions ever. That's my favorite. But it's up to you. So y'all do what you want. And we're adding Ruth to the stage.
So patiently.
Ruth, leading the way. Love the shirt. Love Bluey.
Love it.
It's Bluey on the Friends couch.
Oh, I love it. Gosh, all the things I love.
Worlds are colliding.
It's just
the one where we answer questions. Let's do it.
I guess
the one where we answer questions. That was good.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Ruth.
That was perfect. I am trying to follow other podcasts that have questionable, if any, research.
Oh, okay.
I am having a really hard time finding the information in its entirety. Case documents, anything beyond just the headlines, the current stuff this is the podcast, they're covering this case, and things like that. How do you guys approach the research just for a layman that is trying to have a discerning ear to muddle through the quote propaganda or emotional, this person is innocent because everybody is innocent, that writes us in and says, do a podcast because this person's innocent. And thank God I deliver mail in the country because I am just screaming in my vehicle and only the cows are there to listen because it is just...
Well, the first thing I'll say, Ruth, is I think it's impressive that you recognize, number one, that what you're getting is probably not the full story, because so many people don't. You know, they just assume that whatever they hear from whatever podcast they're listening to is the full story. So that's the first thing. The second thing, you know, it's 2025. You would think that it would be really easy to find like case documents and what happens in a court and all that stuff online. And it is not. And in fact, and this is, you know, one of the blessings of having 50 different states is it is almost impossible because every state does it differently. Some of them, like in Florida, you can read every document you want to read on Casey Anthony. It's all up on you just go to the docket. You can read them. You want to see the jury form where they didn't vote to find her guilty on any of those other counts? It's right there. You can see it. Other states like California, strangely, really hard to get documents. If you want to read Scott Peterson's habeas petition, almost impossible. You basically got to go to the courthouse, right? Well, that's one of the reasons when we do the cases on our website, prosecutorspodcast.com, we always try and link to various things that we've looked at. And if we have a case file, we try and put it up there because a lot of people are sort of proprietary over their case files. Like you'll see these podcasts, they'll do this in-depth study of a case. They paid money for the transcripts. They went to the police station and photocopied everything, and they keep it close and they don't want to share it. That's not our approach, but it is a huge advantage, particularly if you have an agenda. And I think if you look at the Adnan Syed case, which we've talked about a lot, for a very long time, it was really hard to challenge anything that was said about that case in the pro Adnan side because you didn't have the file. And the file you did have was incomplete. You didn't have the defense file. And then the more documents that came out, the more you saw, oh, okay. So the problem is I don't have a great answer for you. There are a lot of resources out there, like newspapers.com is great because you can read the original reporting, and that can be really helpful because a lot of times that will have information that people don't talk about. It's a case-by-case thing. In some cases, West Memphis 3, every document you'd ever want. Other cases, hard to find anything.
And Ruth, by the way, what your gripe is something that I gripe to Brett about all the time, because reporters they're usually actually not even reading the original document, but it would be so much better. All reporters, please do this. Brett, by the way, I was so going to wear that shirt today, but I wore this one instead. So we would have been matchy and have been so cute. Okay. Is to link the court document, because court documents are public, but how accessible they are not in person is another story. But wouldn't it be amazing if every story you read about any case that was reporting on something that happened in court to a document, there was just a hyperlink that said, today the judge ruled that, and it was like hyperlinked to that document. So we gripe about this all the time because we, at least since we typically look at dockets, we know the dockets to go to. If they are accessible, there might be a fee. It's something like 10 cents a page, which is not nothing, but especially when you're talking about like hundreds of pages motions. But since we know where to go look for them, that's one way to do it. Another way, like you said, sometimes you have to go to the court and you need to know how to order certain documents. If they're under seal, you just can't get access to them at all until the court unseals them. And so there is an investigative aspect. And that's why you see a lot of people do those FOIA requests too for case files. But oftentimes, if the case is still open in any way, shape, or form, the FOIA request will be denied for it's under investigation. So you're completely right about that. But here's where I challenge like listeners, informed listeners, when someone's reporting about something, ask them to show their cards. Like what is there to hide, or to say, what is the basis of your research? Because you'll see that a lot of people will start to kind of stutter a little. Well, I definitely read TMZ.com, as opposed to I read the case file. I read the transcripts. One thing that's been really great now when more and more people want us to cover their cases is family members who have spent decades, compiling their loved one's case file. They'll send it to us. When they do that, it is a treasure trove because then we can start sifting through it and then see where there are holes and help them pull additional documents. We recently did that with the Robert A-list case, the really, really old case. He had most of it, but he didn't have access to a lot of transcripts. So we were able to get access to those things. So together we were able to form the whole puzzle. So if you have a case that you are interested in researching, you can always start and then, reach out to us, see if we can help fill in the holes and we can fill the puzzle in together. But you're right. There's not one place to see all of it.
And I'll say this, one other thing you can do is work with other listeners, because if you're listening to a podcast that's covering a case, there's a probably good chance other people are listening to it as well. And I know, there are groups on Facebook who, I don't know how to put this, fact check. I'll put it that way. Who fact check some podcasts that are known to be a little loose with the truth. And one thing they do is working together, they gather the information, because it might be that somebody in the group is, from the city and can go down to the courthouse or ask the police to photocopy the file. So that sort of thing. So that's one way you can do it, is try and work together to triage that.
Well, I must say that from listening to you guys, with the way that you have always lined out and covered a case, that has where my discernment has come from and where my side eye has come from when listening to many a podcast now. And it has
Sorry to ruin them for
really,
Sorry to ruin them for you.
Well, there's you guys and one other that I listen to that is heavily researched, and it shows. And yours is enjoyable in one way, and theirs is a comedy podcast and enjoyable and extremely factual, but they're comedians, and still extremely respectful. And the knowledge that you guys have opened my eyes to from just learning from the ones that are horrible has just been great too. So I thank you guys for that and for teaching us how to just be better citizens. Just asking more questions and not being afraid to say, can you elaborate, and just, can I see some receipts, and just push for that extra narrative and really put an emphasis on ethics. And so that is just something that you guys really bring to the table. And because you don't care what other people think, because you guys are walking such a great, ethical, true, supported line, that is why your success is so unfaltering, and it's so appreciated beyond any words that I could ever muster. So thank you so much.
Well, we
Thank you for
appreciate
those
you too,
kind
Ruth.
words.
Thank you.
Really, thank you. You're the exact solution that we have said to those other podcasters or YouTubers who may not walk that same
Yeah.
ethical line. You've
You don't have to
chosen
be
to be educated
sensationalist
about it. Yeah, you don't have to be
to be
sensationalist.
successful.
We're
You
the
can be
opposite.
Thank you, Ruth.
cold water podcasters and everybody will still love you.
Exactly.
Thank you,
Everybody will
Ruth.
love you. Thank you.
Everybody, not a single hater.
All right. Thank
Too
you, Ruth.
funny.
I'm about to add Claire. Okay, there's now a spot open if somebody wants to try and get in the queue.
Hi,
But
Claire.
before I add Claire, there's a question from the chat, which is, Alice, what do you think about the fact that Casey Anthony is now a legal advisor and a TikToker, apparently?
I mean,
what are your thoughts
true
on
that
that?
she
You
has
want to
been
hire
part
her
of
for
the
your
legal-
next murder?
It's true. She's been part of the legal system since 2011. That's one way to put it. She was on trial, but that is one way to put it. I'm not going to lie. I have not watched her TikTok. I don't plan to watch her TikTok. Good for her. Way to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I wouldn't take advice from Casey Anthony.
I would
if
not
I
take
were you.
advice.
But I mean, look, she ain't never going away. Until the day she dies, she is going to be doing stuff like this. So my advice is, when you see her face, block whatever is showing you her face and try and keep her out of your life, because that's all we can do.
That's right.
Okay, Claire, love the view.
Oh, thank you. Beautiful Chicago.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
Oh my gosh, this is
with
so
a virtual
cool.
background.
Thank you guys for doing this. This is so awesome.
Awesome to have you.
Okay, I might not use the right terminology here, but I'm curious, without details, if either of you have ever had a conviction overturned, and if so, like what that feels like as the prosecutor.
Great
A
question.
conviction
I thought you
overturned.
meant personally, like for me. I was like, wow, it's getting real personal.
You know, this ties into something. You know, we get negative reviews all the time, and they'll say things like, there's no telling how many innocent people they put in
Yeah.
prison. And the reality of the situation is 99% of the people who go through the justice system, it's not even really contested, right? Even if they go to trial, it's not really contested. So the chance that you're going to have a conviction overturned is fairly rare. I do appeals for the whole office and have only seen one or two cases get overturned. And it was usually something that was, number one, technical. Like I've never seen a actual innocence case get overturned. I have one actual innocence case right now, which is like possible. Well, we'll see what happens. But usually it's over something that you knew was a close call, right? Mm-hmm. And you went for it anyways because the evidence was there, but you knew that maybe you had a questionable suppression issue, or you were going to have to rely on some evidence that, is it hearsay? Is it not hearsay? That kind of thing. And so I think the number of prosecutors who are actually involved in the kind of cases we cover, where there is a real question about the guilt or innocence of the person and a real sort of feeling in the public that they might be innocent, is vanishingly rare, and certainly not something that I've seen.
And that's absolutely right. It's helpful to give context, because our experience is like 99.9% of other prosecutors' experience. Almost all of my cases, if it's not a plea deal, there's going to be an appeal, because that's their right. That's why they, didn't plead guilty. They wanted to have the right to appeal. I'm trying to think. I think every single one of the appeals of the convictions that I secured were essentially like summarily denied. Like there wasn't even a question. It wasn't even like a technicality, anything like that. And part of it is you work these cases for a really long time, and it's a long process. There's a lot of chances along the way where you can make sure that you're on the right path. Now, on the other side, there have been many, many cases, both Brett and I have chosen not to indict. So not to move forward with. and you don't even get to the charging stage, that person may not even know that they were on our list to be indicted. So that's a lot of the part of kind of the work that people don't see, is when they're like, well, 99%, our convictions are guilty pleas or whatever. It's over 90%. It's not 99%, but it is a very high percentage. Well, if you add in every single person we investigated, that number would fall drastically.
I had a case once, I tell this story sometimes, where the FBI was adamant that we had our guy and wanted to execute a search warrant, kick down the door, SWAT team. I mean, everything. This guy was dangerous. It was the guy. And I was like, we don't have enough evidence for a search warrant. We don't have enough evidence to go after one. And they called a meeting, and it was me and my boss came. And then this like whole table full of FBI agents and their boss and them trying to convince me to do the warrant. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it. You don't have what you need. And I told him exactly, I was like, you've got to do this. Like, if you can do this, I will give you your warrant, but you don't have enough. And they were very unhappy about that. My boss, to his credit, totally stood behind me on the whole thing. And not 3 days later, they realized the guy that they wanted to do this to wasn't the guy. And it took a little while, but we eventually found the guy, and they got their warrant then because we had enough evidence. And I think people really do, you don't see that, right? Like that, that's not something that ever makes the news. It's not something you see on television, but in real life, that's where the work of preventing that kind of stuff really takes place. If we had done that, it would have been such a bad thing. And it wasn't their fault. They had good reasons, and they were really worried about this guy, but it just turned out that guy was not him. So those are the kind of tough calls you have to make.
Got it. Thank you guys so much.
So much for asking a question.
Bye.
Bye. Joe, my man.
Joe.
How's it going?
Hey,
What Detroit
speaking
sports season are we in right now? Like the
we're getting
Pistons or
ready
something?
Pistons are doing good. Pistons are going to make the playoffs. Baseball
Okay.
starts here soon. And then just for Jason.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, wow.
And I also have my prosecutee from CrimeCon keeping my coat
You're
close.
representing.
Yeah. Both to Alice and Brett, I want to say congratulations on your additions. Alice, like Brett, I'm a fellow NICU parent, so knew what you were going through, and we were praying for
We're
you.
all in this together.
And yes, so
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. I read every single one of y'all's comments, emails, messages. Sorry I didn't respond back, but I read every single one of them when I was in the NICU. So thank you guys.
no problem. We love you, Alice. So my question is, and I don't want to make this political, but it just seems like now, because with the whole Adnan thing and Marilyn Mosby, and then out in California with the previous DA saying he wanted to commute the sentence of the Menendez brothers, basically with no evidence. It seems just like he was trying to save his job in an election year. And kind of without getting into specifics on the federal level, it seems like basically whoever wins an election in your area is really going to define who gets prosecuted for crimes. And I've always thought that electing judges was the worst idea, but now I'm really starting to think that electing prosecutors is a bad idea, because it just seems like more and more stuff's getting political. And, and so it's why I'm glad, you guys, I mean, you're supposed to be protected from the system as AUSAs, you're civil servants, so you weren't, you don't serve at the pleasure of the president, but it just seems like the whole justice system now is getting infected.
That's a tough question on the electing DAs, because on the one hand, you're absolutely right in everything you just said. On the other hand, we're supposed to be this sort of representative democracy, right? Where we can trust the citizenry to make good decisions about the people they put in place, and not having a more sort of maybe French style professionalized, prosecutorial arm. There's more connection to the people. And there's a certain extent to where the political pressure isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you have somebody who, I'll give you an example. I was just listening to this great podcast called Devil in the Deep Blue Sea. It's by Christianity Today, and they're looking at the satanic panic, which is relevant for what we're currently doing. And it's just, they've done 3 episodes this season. The first one is on West Memphis 3. The third one is on the McMartin preschool disaster. And they talk about how McMartin was famous, but there was another case in Texas which resulted in prosecutions and convictions, very similar story, and people who were in prison. And it was sort of through rising public anger that those people were eventually released and eventually exonerated. And I like the fact that prosecutors are somewhat responsible to the people so that people don't just get locked up and forgotten forever, right? Because it's so easy for that to happen because there's so many criminals out there. I mean, we've done several cases. You have a Temujin Kinsu shirt on. I wish the prosecutors were a little bit more receptive to public criticism in that case. So it's really hard for me because I really see both sides of it. And as bad as what Marilyn Mosby did, I still see the advantage of having that access to public pressure when there's a real injustice.
And this is kind of, it's not just the prosecutor. I mean, it's come to light because of the Marilyn Mosby situation in the Adnan case. But these are questions that we face, like for the jury system. We don't have a perfect system, but I think we have a system that at least you don't have people who are entrenched forever. And so jurors, like they're just people off the street. They're supposed to be representative of people in your society. Is that good? These 12 random people, you're going to put your life in their hands? Well, what's the alternative? A demigod who gets to make decisions, who's not accountable to anyone? I think it's a really, really good question. And it's something that runs through the vein of a lot of our democracy and how we've chosen to move forward. At the end of the day, I think I do agree that not having an entrenched power system that can be voted out is probably a good thing. With that comes sometimes really bad people still come into power, even when you have, a representative system.
Okay. All right.
Great question, though.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. And I will hop off and roll Tide.
Roll Tide, Joe. Go Blue.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, Laura, you are next.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Hey,
Jason's technically next, but he has to wait because he doesn't know how to work his
Laura's
computer.
next.
You can do
So, Laura.
Jason next.
No, Laura's next. You are
No,
next.
my cat was screaming like 2 minutes ago. Like, it's fine.
Cat's not screaming anymore.
Give him a minute. He'll start. He'll definitely start. Congrats, Brett, on the new baby coming soon.
Thank you. Yeah, like 10 days or so.
Oh, so very soon.
Sometime in that window.
So I have a question. So you guys are like the only good people in true crime right now because everybody sucks these days. And I promised myself I wasn't going to ask you about Delphi because that video came out, and I'm sure it's like the last thing anyone wants to talk about, that someone would release that video. But in similar BS, the Brian Koberger, who I just think is guilty of sin, and
It's all planted.
Yes.
Yeah, he's guilty of sin, and I don't understand why he just doesn't plead guilty so that maybe the state doesn't kill him, because I think he's just going to get that. But now he's claiming he's autistic, and the defense is trying to say like he's on the autism
Disgusting.
spectrum.
Disgusting is what it is.
Disgusting. And
Yeah.
I'm a teacher.
And it's
of-
insulting, and you should
It
be
is.
insulted.
I am insulted because my shirt says y'all gonna learn today. I'm a special ed teacher. So I am insulted because I teach 6th graders on the spectrum who, spoiler alert, they don't murder 4 people.
Yep.
They don't do that. They're too busy trying to figure out how to be human beings. But my question is there any actual legal basis for that? Like, can you actually claim you're so disabled you can't be responsible for your crime?
Well, yeah,
There is. What's the
you can
basis?
make that claim.
But is there
Okay, so
actually a
there's-
legal basis for it?
So there's 2 ways you could do it. The first would be just take autism out of it and just say you are like of mice and men, right?
Yeah.
So you're so intellectually disabled, you don't, or like Frankenstein at the beginning of the movie where he drowns the little girl.
Yeah.
You're so mentally disabled and intellectually disabled, you don't know what you're doing. You don't realize you're drowning a little girl. There's no malice. There's no intention. There's none of the things that we use. You're essentially so intellectually disabled that you're insane for the purposes of the justice system. Now, in that circumstance, you're also very dangerous. And so probably you would be housed somewhere for the remainder of your life. It would just be a hospital, not a prison. That's one thing. Let's put that aside because that's not what he's saying. He's not
just saying he's autistic.
So when sentencing happens, particularly in a death penalty case, you have aggravators and mitigators. And according to the Supreme Court, the state has to prove an aggravator that makes you eligible for the death penalty. Usually killing more than one person is an aggravator. So they're going to be there. Mitigators, though, basically, if you're the defense, you can put on anything you want. And if you ever read a transcript from a death penalty sentencing, you would be deeply insulted by everything they say.
Probably.
Because it's all things that many people deal with and do not turn into murderers. So it'll be like, I grew up in an abusive household, or I
made
head
bad
injury.
grades and I felt
I made bad
stupid. I
grades.
was
Exactly.
bullied. I
Fell
mean,
behind.
we're not
All
kidding.
those
This
things.
is an absolute. I mean, there are
I'm
very
sure.
sad stories, of course, but there's also anything spaghetti at the wall. They're hoping to add the chips up for the mitigation.
And so autism is just one they've picked. He doesn't think the same way other people do, or maybe he doesn't feel empathy in the same way other people do, whatever they want to claim. And really, you don't want to stop them from being able to make that argument, because his life's on the line, whatever. This is our system. We've decided. But at some point, we need the jury to reject that. And we need the judge to reject that for all the reasons that you, I'm sure, are justifiably angry about.
Well, because it demeans an entire community.
It demeans the entire community, but also this is the best he's got. This is not good, right?
True.
I mean that actually is a big point, because if he were beat as a child or something else, or he can't claim intellectual disability because what is he in school to study very difficult things? So
I was
can't
going to
claim.
say I have kids with 50 IQs who don't
Exactly. He doesn't have a 50, 60 IQ, so he can't argue that. So the best argument he has is this, which half the population is like, I know someone very close with an actual diagnosis of autism, and they are fantastic members of society who do not do quadruple murders. So can raise it. The fact that he raises it actually tells me a lot about what mitigation factors he has, which is to say he doesn't have any.
Nothing.
Right.
He's just guilty.
Just to answer Julie's question about whether this is unusual, it's not. When a death penalty case, you start preparing for the death penalty for the sentencing phase very early on. And then if you're found not guilty, you don't worry about it. But it is basically a mini trial that happens right after the guilty phase with the same jury that found you guilty. So you have to be ready to go as soon as the trial's over.
And it's kind of a nonstop negotiation process. You're signaling to the prosecutor, if you could unearth something that was so devastating, that's going to definitely make the judge say, wow, I don't know if the death penalty is right here. That might change the prosecution strategy and how hard-nosed they come if they're negotiating at all. We don't know if that's the case, but they're signaling to the prosecutor as well. In this case, this is not a strong signal.
Because if they have a strong argument, then it gives the prosecution a reason to say, look, how about we just take that off the table and you plead guilty?
Yep.
Like, you're right. That's a good argument. We're 50-50 on whether we'll succeed. Fine.
I can't believe he hasn't pled
You plead
guilty.
It's because this is his thing.
This is his thing.
He's like Ted Bundy. He wants to be Ted Bundy.
That's true.
Ted Bundy was
It
better
won't shock
at
me
it than
if
he was.
he fires his attorneys at the last minute and represents himself. Won't shock me at all.
He probably will.
We'll see.
And he'll still be found guilty. It just enrages me because defense attorneys seem to have no moral ground anymore.
And just wait.
Crime scene stuff we shouldn't. We say
You
whatever
probably
we
saw
want.
his latest thing is the evidence was planted.
Yeah.
So prepare yourself. The same thing that you saw in Delphi and that you're seeing in Karen Reed is Brian Koberger is the next big money maker case in true crime. So the same thing is coming. Just be ready for it. If it hadn't started
They
already,
got his
it's
fingerprints
coming.
on his knife sheath that they put on a victim.
Yeah, they
picked it up with tape.
They
That's
somehow,
absolutely what
right.
happened. And they took his phone
I
and
would prefer that.
ran around with cell phone signals going around their house for weeks. This was really well planned out. This police force, guys, you are paying. You're getting your money's worth, taxpayers. Let me tell you.
Seriously.
Thanks, Laura. That was
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Jason, you're back.
Hey, Jason. Inconceivable. If you haven't listened to it,
Inconceivable.
I was listening to it just today on a walk in the beautiful pre-tornado weather that we have, and it was fantastic.
Jason, I don't know if you're actually ready or if this is another terrible lie that you're.
Hi, can you hear us?
I still can't hear you.
Wait, talk.
You host podcasts. You edit some of the best shows in the business.
He's just
yet-
he's just shy. He's so shy.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
I don't
Congratulations.
know. I think that there's something wrong with this. I just literally 5 minutes before this happened, I got a new microphone. Same one that Jason Blair uses.
It's very pretty, but I don't
I
know.
love-
if
I
it's
love the
maybe-
glowy.
It's pretty, but apparently it's unreliable.
Don't buy a
but
mic just based on how pretty it is.
I know just how pretty it makes you guys sound. My first question, I have two questions, and I'll be fast about them. Okay, so of course you guys know that I'm working on Inconceivable.
Couldn't miss it.
Plug, all right. The story of Temujin Kinsu and Scott Macklem. Scott Macklem murdered November 5th, 1986 at St. Clair County Community College. So my question to you is, so this case was poorly investigated. So as best as I can tell, because I've played this out, and I played this out with Julia Cowley multiple times as well. Do you guys think that the perpetrator of this crime, which I do not believe is Timothy Kinsey, who was Fred Freeman at the time, do you believe that person pulled up from behind? And the reason I ask is because Scott is shot from a lower angle on the left side of his body. It moves up through his body, and the pellets are close enough that there's wadding in his side, but it's far enough that the pellets do not leave his armpit, which is where they're extracted in the autopsy. So in that case, if Scott was walking to the back of the car, that would suggest to me, which is something that I'm going to go through in my podcast, that he knew the gunman. He approached the gunman thinking something that was going to happen. And when he realized that they had a shotgun, which meant that they would have had to have had it in their right hand, and Temujin is a left-hand dominant person, when he saw that, he turned to run away, and that's when he was shot. Are those things taken into account when you guys are looking at these things? Or is that an investigator's position? I don't understand that part.
So you mean in like our cases, or you mean in Temujin in particular?
I mean in both. Like, is that a cop's job to do, or do you guys do that too? I'm sort of kind of trying to balance both of those things right now.
The first investigation is the police. The second investigation and the first defense attorney should be the prosecutor. Like, the prosecutor should be treating the agent, the investigative agency, as if the prosecutor is the defense attorney, and asking all the questions you're asking to try and nail down exactly what happened.
In other words, there's not segments of the investigation where it's like, well, I can't question the medical stuff. But we shouldn't, in the first instance, if we are not experts, to make certain judgments. That's where we seek out experts. And if we think an expert, we see enough of these things. If we see like a medical autopsy and we're like, there's something off about that. Can we get a second opinion on this? And we ask questions. This is the first thing I do when I get a case file, even every single time. I don't know, maybe 98% of the time, Brett, when an agent brings me a case file, they're like, it's done. You don't have to read it. It's done. There's nothing more to do. Almost 0% of the time do I find it truly done, because I'm marking it up with my questions like a defense attorney, saying additional questions need to be asked here. We need to find out this happening. This doesn't make sense. This is conclusory. How did we know this? Did we find this cell phone? Have we extracted it? And then we go back and forth, back and forth. And that's why, by the way, investigations take so long. It really makes like agents and law enforcement mad when we do that. And then they see the questions we ask and they're like, yeah, all right, you're right. You're right about that. It's not because they're being lazy. It's because they have a lot of things to do, and they do think they're done when they give it to you. This is why you have editors. Even if you're like the greatest writer of all time, you have an editor, because different eyes see different things. And so when you say there's a bad investigation, there can be many parts of that. It could be that the police didn't do a good job. It could be that the prosecutor who got the file didn't ask questions and just took whatever.
Or didn't ask the right questions.
Didn't ask the right questions. All of this can happen. And so it's not completely right to always just blame the cop on the scene as the one who didn't do a good investigation. I'm throwing prosecutors under the bus here too, because that's why we have this iterative process with lots of eyes, different perspectives on it.
And I'll give an example. That same case, the one where I'm the hero because I wouldn't do the search warrant. At another point in that case, they had all this video. We're trying to find this guy, trying to figure out who he is. They had all this video of this guy wandering around town, right? And I was convinced that I had figured out the way he had left town, that he had gone sort of this back way and he was parked in this RV park. And I was convinced. And I was like, you guys need to look at the RV park. He was clearly in the RV park. And they were like, we don't think he was in the RV park. And I was like, no, he's in the RV park. He wasn't in the RV park. They were right. Yeah. but it's that sort of like, you're working together, you're giving them your ideas. They're maybe taking you seriously, maybe not. But the best investigations, everybody is trying to work together to test the evidence from the very beginning so that your case is stronger in the end.
Yeah, and what I'd say to that, just with as you both know, with this case in particular, like it's almost 40 years old. So right now there are very few people that are doing it. So I'm trying to do it the best I can, and I'm it battle at a lot of different places. The one other thing I would ask is, so like, there's the plane theory, and for people that don't understand that, they can listen to the podcast Inconceivable if they want to. We're going to be talking about that. The base notes are this. The prosecution suggested that Temujin took an airplane to fly and kill Scott Macklem. The broad strokes of what everybody really looks at is the whole timeline of the first alibi he has to the last alibi he has. They don't look at the back half of that timeline. The back half of that timeline suggests to me, and I've talked to pilots, I've looked at the weather patterns there that day, it suggests to me that there's absolutely no way he could have done that. And certainly if he did, he had an accomplice. So, I mean, it would have to be absolutely perfect, because the murder takes place at 8:55 a.m. He is alibied back in Escanaba between 11:30 and noon that day. That means he has to leave the murder scene. He has to get back to the plane, which the prosecution suggested that he landed in a field. There are no records of this flight. He would have to land in the field, left the car there, who picked up the car, that's an accomplice, that's a conspirator, flown back, and he would, in the best I can find at that time, is you got about 125, 30 miles an hour in an airplane to get up there. It's 190 miles from Port Huron to Escanaba. That means it's almost an hour and a half there. There's no time for him to have done this. And that's the thing that makes me, I just want to say this here, and I've told this, I think I've told this to you, Brad, and I just want to say here because you have a big platform, but it makes me insane that there is no statute of limitations on murder, but there is on justice, because Temujin has proven his case multiple times, and we are trying to do that here. And I believe that we can get it done. It's just we need a lot of people to talk about it. And the back half of that airplane theory is problematic. And the three things that the jury poll said convicted him, all of them are bunk. And it makes me angry. And I'm sorry to have some righteous anger here. It's kind of like Alice when she was talking about Adnan, and Brett, like you were talking about Adnan last week. I feel
it's good to have righteous anger, though. I mean, that's the way you should feel about it.
I do.
So, Inconceivable. You need to be listening to it. Thank you, Jason, and thank you for all you do for the podcast.
Yeah,
we appreciate you.
All right, love you guys. Thank you.
All the good stuff is Jason. All the bad stuff is us. Okay, Christina, you ready to rock and roll?
Can y'all hear me?
Christina?
We can hear you great.
Hi, Christina.
Oh, it's nice to meet you finally.
Nice to meet
you too.
I've heard a lot about y'all, and I'm a new fan. I've been listening to all your catalog every night.
Welcome.
I mean, hours and hours. It's great stuff. I have a million questions, but I'll narrow it down to a couple. Okay. This is dealing with my cousin Anita's murder case. Y'all have heard about.
Appreciate you writing something for the Substack too.
Thank you. It was really therapeutic for me to write that. It's a 1107 writ hearings is what. I don't know what that is, but that's what we went through, these hearings where this guy's trying to get exonerated. And you've heard of Sergeant Hector Polanco from Austin, Yogurt Murder Shop.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, he was a supervising detective or whatever in the homicide. That was his first weekend. And so one of their claims was that Polanco coerced and threatened him, and all that was his second defense later on. But basically, we went through these hearings. It went before the judge and all that, district court in Austin. And prior to that, there was a secret hearing, closed to the public, and they signed off on a Brady violation, the DA's office and the judge.
It's very similar to the Adnan situation.
Yes. Okay. And we still don't know what that evidence was, and we don't agree with it, but it was related to Sergeant Polanco, who testified at the trial, and this was also discussed on his appeal, and it was denied. Okay, so at the very last second, before the judge made her recommendations, they dropped the whole Polanco aspect, right? They dropped it all. They waived it. The defense did. So the judge gave her recommendations, and one of her recommendations was that he be granted a new trial due to the Brady violation. But shouldn't that be null and void because they dropped the Polanco allegations?
Okay, so an 1107 in Texas is a state habeas proceeding. So basically, they're arguing some sort of newly discovered evidence, which usually is Brady. I don't know the facts of the case that well. It's a case I'm interested in looking at, but I don't know the facts that well.
Okay.
So there would be two aspects to it. One would be the testimony of the detective itself and whether or not that testimony was false or misleading. The other aspect would be whether or not the detective, whether, you want to, him or the department or the prosecutors, whoever it is, withheld evidence, substantive evidence to the defense. So those would be two different things. Like I said, I don't know exactly what it is, but it sounds like probably, like I'm imagining, this is just me imagining what could have happened. I don't like these secret hearings in these cases. The cover they use, and this is what they used in the Adnan Syed case, is, well, we're still investigating. So now we're investigating alternative suspects. So if we have a public hearing, that might reveal information that's critical to a law enforcement. And that was totally a lie. It was just a lie.
Exactly
in the
what
Adnan
they said.
case.
Exactly in our case.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's what they're doing. So that would be what what I could imagine happening is the DA makes a deal to basically not have a negative finding against a police officer, naming that police officer to sort of protect that police officer, but will agree that evidence wasn't properly turned over. I don't know that that's what happened, but just based on what you're saying, that is a possibility.
They're saying that the prosecutor withheld evidence, the original prosecutor, who is my lawyer now. But since they dropped the whole Polanco involvement in the case, they dropped that. They waived it. Wouldn't that Brady violation then be null and void because the Polanco issue was dropped? You know what I'm saying? No,
it wouldn't. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's at the Court of Criminal Appeals right now, and my concern is they're going to grant him a new trial, which isn't going to happen because the DA's office told me they would not retry him. They have no intention.
The great lie out there, sort of the innocence world is, oh, we're just trying to get a new trial. We're just trying to get a trial where justice can be done. No, you're not. Well and good. There won't be a new trial. And then when there's not a new trial, you'll say that person was exonerated. And that's just a lie.
They partnered with the Innocence Project throughout this whole case. They worked together. They interviewed witnesses together, the DA's office and the Innocence Project. I mean, it's been shady from, okay. So one final question is that the Court of Criminal Appeals has a final decision. Let's say they, like this previous judge, deny actual innocence, which is fantastic. She denied it. And I'm assuming the Court of Criminal Appeals is going to do the same. But let's say they grant him a new trial and it never happens. Is he still guilty in the eyes of the law?
No.
No,
he would
because
not be
the conviction
innocent.
is overturned.
Yeah, if the conviction is overturned, he would not.
But look, it could go back down to a plea, right? There's so many things that the DA's office probably doesn't want. They probably will not retry the case because so many years have passed and a lot of resources, all these things. Kind of like we have happening in the Adnan case, there can still be pleas. Or in the West Memphis 3 case, right? In the eyes of the law, there are different avenues to get to a conviction. But
you need a DA who's willing to at least publicly say they're open to retrying.
No,
it sounds like you don't have that.
This is a Soros DA.
Yeah.
And no, it's been horrible. They won't even speak to me anymore or return my calls or emails or anything. But okay, so he'll be considered innocent if he's granted a new trial. But he won't
be considered. He won't be
not
convicted.
Guilty. He won't be convicted.
We don't throw around innocence.
Well, he stands to get $80,000 a year for every year he was incarcerated, which is over $2 million.
I think he would need to be exonerated for that.
Right, for that. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's a very conservative court, which I'm thankful for. I know it shouldn't be political, but it has turned political, and I've been a liberal Democrat my entire life. And I had no idea of this kind of stuff. I will never call myself a liberal again. These people, it's just, I can't even explain how horrible it's been. Did y'all get the wristbands?
And yes, ma'am, we did.
Good.
And we'll be wearing those. I look forward to wearing them at CrimeCon. But I just want to say I'm sorry for what's happened. I know it's difficult, and I know you feel like you're alone a lot.
No, this community, Anya and Kevin, it started with them. They randomly mentioned the case in a cheat sheet because I'm not a podcast person, but I've been interested in true crime forever. It started with them, and then Jessica and Lydia and Jason, and then you all in your community. I have not felt, I didn't know that I would need the support. And my gosh, I have needed it so badly. And it's been wonderful. Jason, you are amazing. I could cry right now. You guys. And if y'all ever want to cover this case, I have everything. I have the original trial transcript, pre-trial transcript, everything, because I think he's guilty, but there is a case to be made for his innocence, but there's a lot of questions that would have to be answered to convince me, and if people like y'all covered it, it might change my mind. I mean, you all might come out saying, no, this guy was railroaded. I mean, I don't know. It's tough, man. It's hard to, I don't know. We're just never going to know ever for sure. You know what I'm saying?
And I think this is what you're expressing right now is something we've talked about. These cases, the victims never have peace.
Never.
There's no finality. And I'm sorry what you're going through. And it is a case I want to take I know it's something that's caused you a lot of pain.
No, Christina, thank you. Thank you for giving a voice to this because, when we were covering the Adnan case and talking about how Heyman Lee's brother didn't have a right to be heard, it wasn't just some like, oh, because we think Adnan's guilty. Victims' rights should be the center of what drives what we do. And a lot of times when we get into these innocence camps or whatever, people forget the voice. And so your anguish that in your writing and also in you speaking now, I think shows a lot of people why we always say victims first. We cannot forget the victims. We cannot forget the victims.
And I'm just a cousin. I mean, her parents' lives were destroyed. Yeah. She was an only child.
She is lucky to have you and your advocacy. Look how far it's gone. Wow. And so thank you for what you've done and for
you guys
giving a real voice to victims. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your community and everything y'all do and your respect to the victims and their families. It's noticeable in the episodes that I've been listening to. It's noticeable and it's so appreciated.
Thank you, Christina. And we'll definitely be in touch.
I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
You guys take care.
Jay.
Okay, so we're about at an hour. We're going to get everybody who's in the queue on, but we're going to have to go fast.
We'll also do this again.
Jason. Not saying you're long.
Relatively quick for Jason. How about that? Only 50 minutes. Alice, first, I have your Canadian maple syrup.
Oh, wow. Did you smuggle that in?
Brett, I almost got you Canadian maple whiskey, but then I thought, should I, as a recovering alcoholic, taking a bottle of whiskey anywhere, would it make it? Would I make it?
Good for you. Good for you.
I'll come up with something else on my next trip, or maybe I'll mail it to you. So my question, and I'm going to tell a story first, but my question really relates to kind of what Christina was talking about to some extent, about sort of like what we do here. And we talk a lot about the dark side of true crime, but I'm going to focus on the bright side. I wrote an article for the Substack about sort of a chain reaction that was caused by listening to your episode on Ashley Loring Heavy Runner, who's, the 20-year-old Montana woman. She was Native. She went missing in the Blackfeet Reservation in 2017. And for me, I'm publicly known, but I'm just a podcast listener, for this. And from that episode, I became, as a listener, interested in missing and murdered Indigenous people and the crisis around that, which led to this interview I did with a Minnesota man who was Native, who lost his daughter. And if I hadn't interviewed him, we wouldn't have had this true crime meetup in Minneapolis in December. And at that event was Jim Schmidt, Gabby Petito's father. And right before Jim went on, a friend of mine sent me a message saying that her boyfriend had choked her. And I got a chance to ask Jim about it in the moment. And he immediately came up and he started talking about domestic violence and choking. And he was like, choking is the number one sign that a murder is coming, and gave great information. He then reached out to me privately afterwards to get the woman resources and information and local numbers and all sorts of stuff that he, in his world, didn't have to do. But that all happened because of an episode I listened to that you chose to do about Ashley Loring. I had a chance this year to talk to Kimberly Loring on my show, who's Ashley's sister. And one of the things that she said she appreciated so much was like the ability to tell her sister's story and how much comfort it gave her to be able to tell her sister's story. And that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't done an episode on Ashley Loring Heavy Runner. The guy I was talking about, Monty, the guy from Minnesota, he said that being able to tell his daughter's story meant that he could rest. And again, I give credit to you guys because that wouldn't happen if you hadn't done those episodes. Christina, another great example, right? Like somebody who she mentioned that writing for the Substack about Anita brought her so much peace. That's a part of the community that you've built here. And there are so many good things in it. And I know, like we're radicals about the dark side of true crime, but man, there's some really beautiful things that happen in real life because of this work. A lot of my guests are victims' family members, and they've connected to each other through being on our shows. Like they've actually met and connected. I know Julie Murray has helped Christina. So the things that you guys, the Murder Sheet, are doing really have a positive impact. I know the negative stuff gets in the way. And so my preamble is all for this question. And it's going to throw you for a loop, though, because it comes down to William Ailes, actually. So you talked about this, and this certainly happened after I interviewed Bob Ailes, who's one of the victims. That was a really tough episode. Tons of people, I know you guys had said on a recent episode, came out to share their stories of childhood sexual abuse. Same thing happened with me. At least two of my listeners, one of who is also one of your listeners, reported their childhood sexual abuse that they hadn't to law enforcement because of it. In all this sort of muck of true crime, and this is a tough topic to talk about, what do you guys think listeners, not necessarily creators, listeners in whatever form, can do to help use what we sort of are exposed to in the true crime community, particularly around these uncomfortable things to talk about, to make something good come out of sort of like this suffering that educates us, it heals us, and it also entertains us? What can just the average listener do to make a positive impact? Because me, as an average listener, I would have never imagined all the things that would have come out of just finding this podcast and listening to that episode.
Thanks, Jason, for all you do. I really mean that. That's a really heavy question, and there is so much everyone can do. You don't have to have a microphone. You don't have to have something outward facing or public. We say this in almost every single one of our episodes. We do the timeline, and we know how it's going to end. It's going to be tragic. And as we're walking through the timeline, we're getting closer and closer to the tragedy that's about to happen. And along the way, we point out, because what I'm hoping to do is that we can change future timelines. We point out, gosh, if someone just said, you doing okay? Or someone said, you don't have to stay in this relationship. Or someone said, the police who showed up, why don't you come with me as opposed to staying here? Why don't I take down this missing child report now instead of making you wait another 5 hours, 12 hours, 10 hours? What about that neighbor who saw something weird, heard a crash, and instead of just closing their blinds, just, actually took an interest in their community? We make those commentaries throughout the timeline because where you can make the most difference in all of this is becoming part of your community. It's no secret that in this new age of having social media at our fingertips, we are lonelier than ever. And crime and true crime has and always will have a place in this fallen world, and that's just a reality. What we can do for those directly around us could quite literally change lives and potentially save lives. We talk about this a lot in the domestic violence context. We talk about this a lot in mental illness context, but it truly can come into play in every single context if we just open up our eyes a little bit and say the uncomfortable thing, thinking about others. Because if you've seen how a lot of these timelines lead to, we can change future timelines.
I think Alice is 100% right. And I think part of that, you talk about listeners, society and the way society views certain things has to change. You and I have talked about this, and abuse, the way we view abuse, the way we view victims, the way we view talking about these things. I mean, even not that long ago, you didn't talk about this. This was between the husband and the wife. I always think of that Godfather scene. There's a scene where they're all sitting around dinner, and it's obvious that the daughter is being abused by, I forget his name, Carlo or whatever. And the mom and Sonny, one of the gangsters, starts to intervene in favor of his sister. And the mom says, don't interfere. And it's like, this is between them. They're a married couple. Whatever's happening in their lives is between them, right? And that is an accurate depiction of how things were until not that long ago. We've gotten better, but we're not there yet. And I think one of the reasons that we do these uncomfortable episodes is because talking about it is so important. And we saw that with that episode, and we saw that with the number of people who wrote in and said, hey, thank you so much for talking about it. I've never really told my story. Here's my story. And there are so many people who are in abusive situations who feel like they are alone and they feel isolated. And oftentimes their abuser makes them feel isolated. That is part of the control. That's one of the ways you control them. You're stupid. You're an idiot. No one cares about you. No one thinks about you. No one wants to talk to you. Like all that, right? And the more we can change that as a society, we'll never get rid of these problems, but it will be something, it'll be a huge positive change. And that is what listeners can do. They make that change in their own lives and in their own families and with their friends and with their relatives and their sisters and their mothers and their brothers. They do that, then I think you start to see sort of that ripple effect that can really make a difference.
And I heard something in every example Alice gave and what you described there. What you guys are essentially saying is just love people, just love them a little bit more. Like when you see something, say something or reach out or, intervene. Like I think of that example that you gave, Brad, about people being isolated and, being told that they're not loved and nobody cares. Well, maybe you show somebody love and it has enormous impact on them. So I think those are great answers. I appreciate it. I will jump off and thanks, guys. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much. Hi,
Trisha, you're up.
Thank you for waiting.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes, we can.
Gosh, I feel like I've known you guys for so long. I've been listening for 4 years, but
Wow, thank you.
Patreon, so lovely to meet you. Won't get too sappy, but I read some things online about you guys a long while back where people were trying to say some not nice things, and I feel like you guys
The internet has bad things to say about people? What?
I feel like I used to be a very black and white person, and I grew up in very, shall we say, very, very deep blue Massachusetts, and that's how
Love
I
Massachusetts.
am. And you guys have really opened my eyes, so I greatly appreciate it. And that was such a wonderful question that Jason asked. I feel like I've getting a little cynical with
whatever.
lately, which I've always been interested in. I actually used to be a journalist as well. That's what I went to school for. So
Wow.
Anya's comments, sometimes if you think about it, because I remember what it's like, and I was never cool enough to cover big important cases, but long way of starting a question. But I was thinking, this is really the focus question. I won't make you guys go too into detail on it. I know that's not the point. But with the Delphi video coming out, I haven't seen it. I really struggled to not watch it. I really wanted to. And I felt bad for wanting to because obviously I listened to the entirety of all the Murder Sheets episode. I know what's on the video.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to see anything that I don't know exists. And I'm wondering, in regards to that video, if you guys feel comfortable saying, do you know or have any thoughts as to how that video was released or leaked? I don't know. And if so, what are they? And is there any sort of ethic to viewing exhibits? Because someone in the comments on Facebook said something I hadn't thought of, which was, well, yes, the exhibits are supposed to be public, but they're public in the context of the trial, and they served their purpose in the trial. And that got me thinking, yeah, like, what is the point of a public exhibit if not the public to view it? But, well, yes, the public did view it in the trial. So my long question is, what are your thoughts about the release of exhibits in the way that they've been? And of course, if you feel comfortable, and the viewing of exhibits and court material, in general, especially with a case like this.
Okay. So I've thought about this a lot. I mean, I think it was leaked by the defense, either by defense associates or by the defense directly. The appellate team says they didn't do it. I have no reason to doubt them. I think there's a lot of different ways that people could have gotten it. There are a lot of really shady people around the defense team. So even if it's not the defense team themselves, it was one of their friends who did it. It's put up on a pro Richard Allen website. And the whole purpose was to try and further this conspiracy theory, which is what they're doing. So I think that's how it came out. Okay. On the question of, and I'm interested to hear what Alice says about this. I think this is really hard. And I think true crime is really hard for this reason, because true crime is true. So to give you a counterexample, in the West Memphis 3 case, there are documentaries that have been viewed millions of times that show the dead bodies of 3 children on the side of a riverbank or a ditch bank. 3 8-year-old nude, brutally murdered children. I don't know why that happened. I don't know what happened west of Memphis, but it did. And I've seen that. A lot of people have seen that. I have, as part of our research for West Memphis 3, I've looked at a lot of autopsy photos of those children. They're terrible photographs, not for voyeurism, but because I think if we're going to cover the case, it's important. In this case, I want to make a very fine distinction. Number one, if someone wants to call me a hypocrite, that's fine. I'm fine with that because I recognize maybe the distinctions I'm making don't have a good basis. You know, I sort of agree with Emerson on this, that a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. And it's not necessary to be consistent across the board. And maybe I'm inconsistent here. I actually don't have a problem with you watching the video. I understand that. What I had a problem with was the fact that the video was plastered all over the internet, that I couldn't go on Instagram without it immediately start playing on every true crime page that I followed, that the same thing happened on TikTok, that it was getting plastered all over the news. Maybe that's hypocritical, and I understand that, but the notion that if you were someone who loved those girls, you basically had to go into hiding for 2 weeks, and maybe that wouldn't even be enough to avoid seeing the moment where they were kidnapped by their murderer really bothers me. And I didn't want it on the gallery. Now, I didn't say you can't put it on the gallery because that's not my place, but I made it clear, in my opinion, it shouldn't be there for that reason. And so maybe that's a weird distinction. I don't know. The fact that this case is so fresh is also different to me. I just feel like a more historical case, a case that's 20 or 30 years old, it's just a little different. The wounds are so fresh. The conviction is so fresh. And frankly, it's just nothing people are doing. You're not going to watch that video and suddenly find some great epiphany that's going to affect the case, right? It's not going to happen. And the way it's being used to basically attempt to free their murderer bothers me. So that's my position on it. And call me a hypocrite. I'm fine with it if you do.
No, and I think in this, the not being able to escape it, I think is incredibly difficult because clearly it was released for the purposes of trying to change the conviction based on public opinion. We do not want mob rule. And so it does everything to encourage mob rule. It was public. You're correct in the instance of the trial, because we've decided as a judicial system that we will put our hands. He chose to go to trial with 12. I mean, I probably would too. I don't really want one judge to make the decision of my life. But those 12 jurors viewed the video, and in context with everything else. That's the other thing. When you leak different parts of the evidence, this was an incredibly long trial with so many exhibits. This is but one exhibit. Just like, the very first question we had, someone said, well, when you're cherry picking all the evidence, it's really hard to know the whole picture. That's my problem when parts of evidence are leaked out and people say, well, that part is public. Yes, in context, everything in context. And also, what is the purpose? Is the purpose to encourage mob rule? Well, that is not, but you're still fighting within the system through your appeal system. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And also, when you're encouraging mob rule, you're undermining the entire judicial system while re-victimizing the victims and their families who have been wanting to escape the last moments of their loved ones' lives. And yet here it is, every TikToker gets to comment on it for the purpose of, essentially, I'll say it, mob rule. And I don't believe in mob rule.
Like prurient interest. Like I remember a friend of mine is also very interested in true crime. We both very closely followed the trial when it was happening. And I remember when the crime scene photos leaked, she was really struggling with wanting to look it up. And of course, I know her personally. I know she's not a bad person at all. And she was trying to decipher, why do I want to see this? And I'm like, it's almost like maybe you want to prove to yourself that it's real. Like you almost can't even believe it's reality.
And look, if you've seen the video, I'm not going to say there's no value to it, because if you see that, and I don't know what other people are saying, but if you see that video, number one, well, Bridge Guy's the killer because he's right there. Number two, you hear the terror in those girls' voice. I felt like I had to watch it, but as soon as I finished with it, I hated the fact that I watched it. I hated that I heard their voices. I hated that Libby is obviously trying to be brave and strong for Abby, who you can hear how scared she is. And Libby is trying to stay calm. Like the whole thing made me feel sick to my stomach.
Let me say something else. I chose not to watch it. it was plastered everywhere. I automatically, when videos start playing, they're on mute. I would immediately scroll past it so that it would not go on mute. So if you're in the camp of not wanting to view it, don't, because I know how I'm going to feel. This case already affects me so deeply. I was like, you know what? I don't need to participate in this. I don't need to view it. So the fact that you haven't seen it yet, and if you don't want to, if anyone else is out there and doesn't want to see it, you don't have to. That's part of your choice here as well. But if you do view it, I don't think you're a bad consumer of the content at all because you didn't leak it. but that's kind of giving you a reason if you don't want to view it.
Yeah, it's such a connected world. Like in the past, I'm sure it would have been the case that the only people who would see an exhibit like that were the people who were in the courtroom, the only people who would have access. And now looking at it in the context of the world we live in, it's like a lot more people are having access to these exhibits than the people who originally designed this court system probably ever could have imagined. But yeah, I can definitely see the value in watching it and not watching it. I keep going back and forth, but yeah, Kevin and Anya in their, I'm sure you guys have seen in their Facebook group. It's very, very hard to see from what they've said. Yeah. I'm sure. Right.
Well,
thank
you for bringing up the question. It's a question that needed to be addressed, and I appreciate you doing it. So
I appreciate you waiting all the way to the end. Almost.
Of course. Thank you, Trisha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi,
Jessica. Before you go, technically Megan was before you, but she dropped off. She wants to ask about our pets. This should be a quick question for Alice since she has no pets.
My pets are a bunch of 8-foot to 10-foot snake skins that hang on my walls that my kids like to pick up from my backyard. So I'd like to say that they are my pets because they clearly live in my backyard and their skins are now tacked to my wall. And I say tack like with a thumb tack.
I have a dog. I have a hound dog who will rip your face off if you try and come into my house. So
he has almost ripped my face off. True.
He has.
He's a rare.
All right, Jessica, what's up? How is it across the pond?
No guns, shit. Rubbish, sorry. Sorry, Jason.
This is the Prosecutors After Dark.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, wow. Don't cover your face. That's okay. It's hilarious. That's exactly the comedic relief.
How's the move going?
Move is going well, yeah. Well, stressful, but yeah. It's going good. I got some packing done today. That was good.
Excellent.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
So, like, I've had to kind of compose myself several times because Christina, my wonderful friend Christina, made me cry. And then we were talking about the kidnapping video, and it's just, it's a lot. I try and lighten the mood with a question that is also kind of a thinly veiled attempt to encourage people to do something positive.
Do it.
You guys wrote a really brilliant open letter to the parole board in Texas for Pablo Velez Jr., which people should read. I suppose the question is kind of, do you feel that, like, and I hope that the answer is yes, but do you feel that people writing letters like that, like people like me, for example, certainly doesn't live in Texas, does that kind of does that have an impact on parole boards? Can that change things? And I mean, I'm guessing that they get a lot of letters from people saying, free my man, he's innocent. And
that I don't think is helpful.
They're not. Okay, fair enough.
If you read the letter, and it's a letter we sent to them, I mean, so hope they have it. One of the things we really wanted to do was not only say, free my man, he's innocent, but make an argument for it, both, and acknowledge what they're, basically we said in the letter, number one, we get it. You're not deciding whether somebody's innocent or not. But if they're innocent, they're probably less dangerous, right? I mean, that's one thing. And number two, oh, by the way, typically here's some stats that you might find interesting. Most people have been in prison as long as him get paroled. So that's what we were trying to do. I think it's good to have support. I think, and I've been to parole hearings, and when the victim stands up or the victim's representative stands up in a parole hearing and says he should stay in prison, and then they turn to the side of the criminal, the defendant, and no one speaks for them, no one wrote anything, there's nothing, I think that does have an effect. So I would say if you have something to say, if you can show that support in a way that might affect, go ahead. It can't hurt.
And I would say this is a very active and amazing community that does things like pick up the phone and write letters. A lot of people actually don't write letters or do anything. They like yell to the wind, but like actually, except for the famous cases, a lot of these cases don't have people, and lawyers are usually trying to like look for family members who will write letters and they'll like, get to it. And then they miss the deadline and then it's not before the board. So I always say, if you have something to say more than just rawr, do it.
If you're going to do it in Pablo's case, you should go ahead and do it. It is already under, because we emailed and mailed it. And when we emailed it, we got a response that said he is currently under review. That review will probably be complete sometime next month. So act now if you want to help in Pablo's case.
Well, yeah, I have written, and I think I'm glad that you guys say could make a difference, and I hope people do. Before I go, this is a book that doesn't get recommended very often on West Memphis 3, Box Full of Nightmares, Terry Hobbs' memoir. It is highly recommended.
One of the books I read for the case. Got it downstairs. All right, thank you, Jessica.
Love you, mean it.
Love you, mean it. Ashton, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing well.
So relaxed.
Yeah, I'm pretty cozy. It's rainy here. Husky's asleep in front of me. So, well, thank you guys for doing this. And I have a quick softball question, but first I just wanted to thank you guys for all of the content you're putting out about ethical true crime and recentering the victim. I work for the National Center for Victims of Crime, and that's some of the work that we're doing. And we just put out a media guide for content creators on how to do this ethically and things like that. So it's just cool to see some of my favorite podcasters doing the same thing. So
thanks for what you do.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, because one of the things we talk about is how, we're not professionals. Most podcasters have no professional basis whatsoever. Right. So having something like that is really important.
Yeah, and just a little plug, we'll be at CrimeCon, have a table, so I would love for you guys to meet our CEO.
I was gonna say, let us know what we can do to help.
Oh yeah, I'll be there. I'm super pumped. So my brief question, so in this landscape that we're in, I think everyone's like trying to think, okay, if I get furloughed or if I lose my funding and get laid off tomorrow, what am I gonna do? My husband said,
almost not shutting down. So we got that.
Yeah. My husband said today, like, what is your non-big girl job going to be? And I said, I'm going to go work at the Ritz and make a bunch of money. So if you guys weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
You're being which of our 5 jobs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If I'm not a lawyer and the podcast closes, I'm going to work at the Buc-ee's. I'm going to run the car wash. That's what I'm doing.
Have you seen the signs of how much Buc-ee's employees make?
They make so
much
much
like
money.
Manager, $180,000 a year. And I'm like,
it's amazing. That's the car wash. I feel like I can run the car wash. I don't know if I can run the whole Buc-ee's, but I can run a car wash. So
you could run, the car wash, you press
Buc-ee's.
a button.
Though I'm fine just being an associate. I'll just ring people out. Or maybe I'll make the brisket. I
really like the person when you drive up though. They run out and like scrub all of your lights really fast before you go through. I'm like, man, you hustle. Job. You hustle. Yeah. That's some hustle right there. Okay, so no longer a lawyer. Podcast shuts down. Brett doesn't want to be my friend anymore. Man, you took Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's is a great one. Okay,
sorry.
Well, we're gonna take the obvious one then. I'm gonna go sell me some Hoddeseys. Who would not buy a Hoddesy from me? I'd be the best Hoddesy saleswoman.
You would be a great Hoddesy saleswoman.
I would just be like selling Hoddeseys because you shouldn't buy what you deal. I would buy so many new Hoddeseys.
I think that's only when it's drugs that you don't buy what you do.
Yeah,
but
otherwise you're fine.
I would just have a lot of minivans. It'd be
get you a new Hoddesy every year.
There's worse addictions for sure than minivans. So
they're so great. I love them. So thanks for asking that question, because now I think I'm going to go look into how to start selling Hoddeseys.
That's a great question.
Well, thanks
for keeping it light. It's been kind of heavy tonight.
I know.
It has been a little bit. I'm like, I got to bring some levity. So
I can tell what type of work you do, and you do it very well. I can tell.
We're looking forward to seeing you at CrimeCon.
Yep, I'll be there. Thanks, guys.
Yes, Christy. Buc-ee's has the best brisket.
The best brisket.
Micah, second to last. Don't leave us hanging.
Hi.
Hello, Micah.
Uh-oh.
Micah went to the bathroom.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, Micah was like, this is so boring. I don't want to listen to you guys anymore.
Alice and Brett without a outline is so boring.
Oh, there's Micah. Hello, Micah.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you.
There you go.
Yes. Okay, that's so exciting. Sorry, I'm one of your many Australian fans.
Australia.
Yes, big fan. I've been listening since Dali Rutia, actually, which was a fair bit a while ago. And yeah, I can't believe I'm actually speaking to you guys. But I did have a question, and I only came into the stream halfway through, so if it's already been answered, let me know.
That's okay. Ask away.
Do you guys think a lot about the future of the podcast? Because I know that, like, when the first West Memphis 3 episode dropped, people were saying a lot about, like, this is the last thing of the... Yeah, this would be the end of the podcast. And obviously, everyone, it was a bit of a bittersweet, if true, moment. Considering that West Memphis 3 is probably going to go for, 200 episodes or whatever, I guess that's not that big of a deal. But do you guys often think about, like, how you like want to continue the podcast.
I didn't think we'd make it this far.
I was gonna say, Brett and I don't think we thought about episode 2.
I thought a podcast, I actually said this to somebody. I thought a podcast really has about a 5-year horizon, that after about 5 years, everybody's bored with you. Like, you're just saying the same thing. Oh, it's Brett and Alice again. Oh, they're talking about it. They're going to do a timeline.
You know, I feel like
everything's on you right now. I'm sorry. Everything's on you right now. If you may be able to talk us.
Are you saying we should keep going after West Memphis 3? Is that what you're saying?
I think there's many more things I'd want to hear your perspectives on for sure. I mean, I think that's why West Memphis 3 was one of those ones people really wanted to hear about, as well as things like John Bonet. It's that everything seems so unclear. None of the options seem perfect. So they want to hear what Brett and Alice have to say. I mean, I think there are many other cases from Australia, particularly. I mean, I've got some that I definitely think about that I really want to hear your opinions on. Even like recently, the Aconcagua mystery. I'd never heard of that, and it was so mind blowing, and I really loved your take on it. So I'm a big vote in terms of staying.
I will say
you're
a really good advocate. You know, I will say this. I think part of the reason we've had staying power is because we do not care about what the 1-star reviews say.
It's true.
And so and part of that is we're kind of like, you know what? We will never sell out. We will not cut the music short, and we will never be like bought out in terms of our opinion. And if that can continue, then Brett's over there being like,
depends
I don't know.
On the price, really. I mean,
he's like, but I think as long as we do that, we do that because we don't think about the future of the podcast. It's very bad business, as to be totally honest. All of our cases, we're like, I'm about to blow it up. Well, here we go. Let's go down in flames at least.
I mean, I honestly think I think you have to do it that way. I would not want to do this. If we ever got to a point, like I remember seeing a post about, now I'm not going to mention the creator, but I remember seeing a post about Karen Reed. And I don't even know if this is true, but there was a creator who somebody got a screenshot that basically said, I can't say anything against Turtle Boy or Karen Reed, or everyone will turn on me and I'll lose everything. Right? If the podcast ever gets to a point where I feel like I can't say something because I'm afraid everyone will stop listening, that's the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
That's when it's over. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. I'm never going to do that.
And truthfully, you know how we always joke that I don't know how internet works and I don't know how to find the 1-star reviews? That's kind of by design. I don't go read those because I know if I start reading them, I'll feel self-conscious and I might be something different. And I'm like, you know what? I don't need to fill my brain with that. There's going to be haters. I know people hate it, and that's okay.
That's fine.
But I love me, so it's okay.
I really support this approach. I think that something that keeps people coming back is that they know when they see that new episode drop that whether it's about Adnan Syed or Karen Reed, to name a couple, like what you say is what you mean, and you're not willing to back down on that because there's an internet mob that thinks that Chloe the dog is, you know, a murderer. So I really respect that. I think that's what a lot of people here really want to see, because I'm going to be honest, if they wanted people who just like bloat all these conspiracy theories to make a ton of YouTube videos, like there are places they can find that. But I think to find a podcast that has this type of integrity and that stands by what they really think, I think that's a pretty rare thing.
You are awesome, and I just love your accent, and you are a bright light. Thank you. It's late for us here, and you've totally like.
I feel like you're resurrecting the podcast. It was at the end. Now it's like, I don't know.
We're not committing.
Maybe we'll only release episodes
after West Memphis 3. We're gonna
It's gonna be a year. Maybe we'll only release episodes in Australia. Maybe we should do that.
That's such a good idea.
I like that.
There you go, pure Australia.
Yeah.
Australian prosecutors. What do you call your prosecutors in Australia? Are they prosecutors or are they
They're also called prosecutors. We just say words a bit differently. I mean, I love both of your accents very much.
Your accent is so much better.
Your accents sound really funny.
The Australian accent is the best.
It is the
best accent.
You can't
There's
not smile when you hear it.
Oh my goodness. Well, because
I remember I went to Vietnam once, and I took this tour, and our tour guides had all learned English in Australia. So we had these Vietnamese tour guides who all had Australian accents, and it was just the funniest thing. It was like, this is so cool.
You guys sound so cool when you say things. You're like the prosecutors. I'm like prosecutor. You know?
Yeah, that sounded terrible. It's grating on the ears. You know,
it's prosecutors. You know, it's great. It's very laid back.
Very laid back.
We are laid back.
All right.
That is what we have. Thank
Well,
you
you're
so
awesome.
much.
Thank you so
are.
Enjoy the
much.
rest of your day. I'm sure it's
been
like
such
3
an
o'clock
honor
in the
speaking to
afternoon
you
there.
guys. Yeah, I can't
Thank
wait
you.
to hear the rest of your episodes. Best of luck. Take care.
Thank you so much. All right, Sophie, you are
Close it out.
closing us out.
All right, now I'm gonna bring you guys way down.
Oh, it's so fun. We were never gonna quit the podcast again. Are those like those Smurfs behind you?
Those are
No,
awesome.
Those are Yetis.
Yetis!
So
Oh, I love it.
We made them with forks
it.
and paint.
They're great.
Yeah.
Are they radioactive? Or are they just
They
regular?
are. We rubbed some uranium on
I
them.
was gonna say we got it from Karen Silkwood.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
so much. So easy to get plutonium out of
I
the
know. Just went and picked up some pellets.
love the shirt too, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Mm.
Okay, so I had a big list of questions, but I know it's late. So I'm just going to throw out a couple. One came from the chat.
Sophie always comes up with the best questions, by the way.
She does.
This one is a like prosecutor related one. It says, are there any cases that you guys have covered that you wish that you could have prosecuted yourselves?
Oh.
That's a lot of pressure. I feel like we could have won the Casey Anthony case. Is that
You
really
feel-
full of myself to say?
Yeah, it is. It really is. No, I'm just kidding.
I think you could have.
I think we could have won the Karen Reed case, but that's just me.
I do actually think we could have won the Karen Reed case. You're right. You're right about that one. I think it's really hard because being a prosecutor is hard. And we get the benefit of sitting back and reading the entire, we know everything, it's all
Our job
come
is
out
easy.
already. Yeah. So we get to do looking backwards, and we have the benefit of seeing how everything's played out. So it's not fair to the prosecutors there, because I don't want to demean the prosecutors who originally prosecuted it, because when you're in the moment, it is really hard. You're having to make judgment calls and you're balancing all these things, your sleepless nights, all those things. But in terms of strategy, yeah, I'm going to go with Karen Reed, because I don't think it was their fault, but they got swept up into the storm of the conspiracy theory and they were too reactionary. And in that case, you really have to show the prosecutor needs to be the leader of the story, because it's your burden of proof.
And let me just say this. People always say this, and I really appreciate it. It's a very nice thing to say that, oh, I wish Alice and Brett could have prosecuted that because, man, they would have destroyed it. They would have done so great. Let me just say this. When we talking when Alice gives her closing argument in the Adnan Syed case, there are no rules of evidence. There's no.
I can't speak like that in court.
We can't do a lot of the stuff we do because that's the way a court is. And sometimes y'all will see prosecutors and like, man, this guy's boring. It has to be boring. It's often boring. If you watched us in court, you would be like, who are these people? But this is so boring. But that's just the way it is, and you want it to be that way, because as passionate as Alice was, and she carried me, I was with her all the way, and it was the proudest I've ever been of her. But you really don't want people to convict people because of passion. And we said this before. You don't want people to send someone to prison for the rest of their life because the prosecutor was such a great orator. You want it to be cold, scientific, evidence-based, right? So trials are never like that. So would I have liked to have prosecuted Karen Reed just because we would have approached it differently? Yes. But that's a very different thing than, man, we would have been so much better than X prosecutor. Remember Alec Murdaugh? While it was going on, people were criticizing the prosecutors in that case. And we were like, what are y'all talking about? They're amazing. And they were amazing. And then they won. And everybody's like, wow, they were so great. How fantastic they were. It's funny how hindsight affects people, but they were always fantastic. But a lot of times it seemed like they were being tedious. It seemed like it was boring, because that's how a trial really is. So
that's a great point. This is not a question asked this time, but a lot of people say, what do you like about the podcast and why do you keep doing your day job? The podcast unlocked something for both of us 5 years ago, because this is how we have a lot of internal dialogue going on when we're in court, a lot of WTFs that we cannot express,
right.
that we can express in the podcast. When we're going through the timeline and we're like, what the F were they thinking? I think that all the time in court, but I have to be super professional and unemotional. My voice is incredibly steady. There are no Alice on the edge of tears or passion. Nothing. That's not me in court, because that's how you have to act as a lawyer and certainly as a prosecutor. And so what you guys hear here, it's our stream of consciousness that's not allowed outside of our heads, typically when we're in the legal field.
Do you think also too, because you guys are looking at the cases after everything is said and done, and you said that you got to see all the discovery and everything, and you get to see all that. Do you think because there always seems to be so much more information that is just...
Well, I'll give you an example. Like, take the Adnan Syed case. One of the things that I thought was really powerful in that case was the fact that he told his defense attorneys that after school, he and Hay would go to the Best Buy, they would have sex, she would drop him off, then she would go pick up her cousin, right? Very powerful. Really affected how I thought about that case. Not admissible in court.
Right.
Like, the statements you make to your attorney are privileged for a reason, right? Now, the privilege had been lost because of how they treated that evidence, but in trial, you would never be able to use that. So you're 100% right. It's much easier to make that argument when you can use evidence that would not otherwise be admissible.
Right.
Prior bad acts. All the time. We go through, we're doing that right now in West Memphis 3. Things that may have triggered motive. We get into all of that in the podcast. Doesn't matter at all in the court of law. You don't have to have a motive. You cannot really, for the most part, let in prior bad acts just because this person strangled 10 other women. For the most part, not admissible here. When I think that's really important, because we have two different jobs. In court, we have the job to follow the rules of evidence to convict. But in the podcast, we're really actually trying to figure out what happened. And that's why there are two different standards.
A less serious question. What is the worst meal that you've ever had?
Oh, God.
I can answer this.
I have like a 10-minute story on this, but so I'll let Alice go first.
It was something I made.
Hey, buddy.
So my sweet husband, Mr. Alice, he is so nice and always eats. Hi, Sai.
I don't believe the story already, because I've eaten Alice's food and it's great.
Well, this is why this is so embarrassing. So I'm not a great cook, but I try to make things healthy. And, for the most part, he eats everything I make. He's so wonderful about it. And I also don't like to waste food, right? Like, I worked for a nonprofit where it was, fighting against food waste in college, helped found this nonprofit, delivered lots of meals that would otherwise be thrown away. So I feel very passionate as well about like not throwing away food. Brett, on the other hand, doesn't like leftovers. He throws away all food all the time. I can't do that. It's just like the immigrant, mentality.
Wait, you don't even save your leftovers for like a day?
He doesn't. How sad.
There are a few leftovers, I will say, but they are very few and far between.
Is that okay? I'm sorry. That's the definition of privilege, but
I have a 2-day limit.
Money.
And then
2-day limit.
Yeah.
Mine is, it really is, I think, from the immigrant mentality. Like, I never throw away food. I cannot throw away food. It pains me.
There's certain food that tastes better the next day.
You know what tastes good the next day? Spaghetti.
Most noodle dishes actually taste better. Most pasta dishes taste better the next day. I'll give you that. But
it's not about taste. It's about waste, y'all. Anyways, okay, so this has to do with not wasting food. This all goes into the story. So my mom had brought me all of this like dried seaweed, which is a very common ingredient in Asian dishes.
Alice's best stories start with her mom. It was like the onion story, right? Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
This was about 10 pounds. She brought me about 10 pounds of dried seaweed. And this is like straight up from the sea. They like dehydrate it and this is it. And it can taste good if you cook it correctly. But I had 10 pounds of dried seaweed. And I was like, how am I going to use up 10 pounds of dried seaweed? So I thought, I shall make seaweed soup. So I used almost... But here's the thing about dehydrated seaweed. When you rehydrate it, it expands to about 10 times. So I made a stock pot. I don't know, like think about crawfish boil. That's how large the pot was. And it was filled to the brim in seaweed and it soaked up all of the juices that it was only seaweed. I put nothing else in there, maybe an onion. And there was so much seaweed, but I can't throw away food. And so I made my husband eat it for like 5 days.
Oh, God. Wow. Okay.
That's his worst meal ever, too, I guess.
So I'll say this. Usually Alice is the one who loses us listeners based on her animal stories.
It's true.
I'm about to do it. So it's been a pleasure having you guys as listeners.
See, I told you I was going to end the podcast.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy whatever podcast you listen to in our place. Okay. So the first time I went to Japan, one of the things that I wanted to try was whale, because there are only a few places in the world you can get whale.
Gosh.
Japan is one of them. Alaska is another, and Norway, I think. So basically places that have sort of a cultural attachment to whaling. So the natives of Alaska have hunted whales for a long time. They still hunt whales to this day. Norway has a similar thing, and Japan. And in Japan, as a matter of fact, whale meat after the war, so in the immediate aftermath of World War II, whale meat was readily available when there wasn't a lot of other meat available. So all these people grew up going to public school eating whale meat. And so they had this very sort of nostalgic view of it. So to this day in Japan, there are restaurants that only serve whale. So I was in Japan and never had whale, obviously. I was like, I'm going to go have whale. So I go down to Shibuya, which is like this it's the busiest cross section in the world. Like there's a camera on the crosswalk there. You can watch it. If you've ever seen pictures of Japan with 1 million people crossing the street at the same time, it's there. All right. So I go down there. That's where the whale restaurant is. There's a massive whale hanging outside the restaurant, right? Big whale. So I go into the restaurant. I speak no Japanese at all. I only speak English and barely speak that. So I go into the restaurant and they look at me, and racist that they are, they're like, "Sir, we only serve whale here." As if I didn't know that coming into this place with a giant whale hanging outside. And I was like, "That's fine. I would like the whale." And the guy looks at me and he goes, "Only whale." And I'm like, "I know, just whale.
Perfect.
That's fine. White guy from Alabama has come here to eat whale." And he's like, "Whale." And I was like, "Yes, whale." Right. And I'm starting to get a little angry because I'm like, "Who do you think you are? I'm here to eat whale. I can handle the whale. What's going on here?" Right. Like, why are you being so jerk about this? Right. He's like, "Okay, fine." So he takes me back. He seats me. He gives me a menu. And he's like, "Whale." And I'm like, "I know. Whale. I got it." Waiter comes up and he's like, "Sir, only serve whale here." And I was like, "I know you only serve whale." And he's like, "Whale." And I was like, "Yes, whale. I got it. It's whale." And he's like, "Okay, what would you like?" Right. And so I'm like, "I would like the whale." He's like, "Okay, how would you like the whale cooked?" And I was like, "I didn't realize there were different ways to cook whale." And so I was like, "What are my options?" And he's like, "Well, you can have grilled whale, or fried whale, or broiled whale, or you can have whale sashimi." And I'm like, "I would like whale sashimi." And he says, "Whale." And I was like, "I know it's whale. Bring me the whale sashimi." Right? He's like, "Okay." So he goes off. And I'm sitting there thinking, these people, I think I can handle the whale. And then as I'm sitting there, I start to think, whale is not a fish. Whale is a mammal. And then he brings me this plate and he plops it down in front of me. And there's like all these cubes of whale chopped up in perfect sashimi sizes. But unlike sushi, fish, they're like oozing blood. I mean, basically, I have in front of me like 10 pieces that are just chunks of raw meat. So there's all this raw meat. There's a pile of rice, and there's some soy sauce. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm holding my chopsticks in my hand, and I'm thinking, I can't send this back.
They're gonna be like, "We told you it was whale."
I know. Like, I've been so adamant. I can't send it back. I have to eat it. And so I take my chopsticks and I pick up the first piece of whale meat. And as I squeeze it, the blood oozes out of it. And I'm like, "Oh, God." So I take a bite of the whale. It is impossible to describe what raw whale tastes like. It's not only is it like bloody, but it's also oily. So
Right.
it's like coating your mouth with oil and blood. And so then I'm like getting the rice, but when I stick my chopsticks in the rice turns red because it's like there's so much blood, and I have to eat all of this. It was the most disgusting meal I've ever had. The guy comes over and I'm like, man, can I have some sake, please? I'm like chugging the sake, trying to get this taste in my mouth because it's coating my mouth because of the oiliness of all this. I'm like, can you bring me a shot of vodka? He brings a shot of vodka. I drink the vodka. It was so, but I tell you what, in honor of my country, I ate every single piece of that raw whale, and I will never forget it. And it was my punishment for eating a whale because it was awful.
Was your wife with you?
Nope, it was just me.
You were all alone.
I was
no
all by
one could
myself.
even watch you. This only exists in your memory.
And and it is burned into my mind.
That is the most disgusting thing
It was
ever.
so terrible.
That's a great one to end on.
Most people probably just loved watching you struggle that whole
Yeah,
time.
I felt like everyone in the restaurant was watching me as I did this. But
They're like, we told them 3 times.
yep, they did. 37 times.
Well, we've lost all our listeners at this point. So
It was a pleasure. It was great. Yeah.
and people get mad at me for what I've done.
Right.
You ate a whale.
I know, a sentient being.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh
At
geez.
least I can say I did it. Never had dog though. You gotta say that.
Good.
Oh my god.
I had other questions, but it's been 2 hours, so I'll save them for next time.
Thank you, Sophie. You're the best.
Yes, you guys are the best.
Yes, thank you so much, Sophie.
Yes.
Wow.
And thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. We have been here 2 hours. This was the most active Q&A we've ever had. Like the queue was full. We're gonna have to do this more often, apparently.
I know. Apparently, I thought this was going to be, try to get people to ask questions. But what I have to say, Brett, is that I think everyone would much rather eat my seaweed soup than what you went through.
True. It's true. No
Come on
question
over,
about it.
guys. We got 10 pounds of seaweed soup. Oh my goodness. Well, guys, this has been awesome. Thank you for showing up with such good questions and showing us you want to do this. So we'll do this again for sure, because I feel bad for the people who have dropped off in the last 2 hours before their questions were answered. We were answering questions in the chat as well, because if you are on Patreon, you get to chat while we record these live. This is always so fun. Let us know what you think at prosecutorspod@gmail.com. And until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs.
I promise it's not just me today, but Alice is currently having technical difficulties, so we're doing the best we can. She'll be here in a minute. Hello, everyone. Got quite a little queue here. People who want to talk. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people in the queue. So apparently the problem is her computer was not plugged in, so it has no battery, so it's like shutting down on her. So she's plugging it up. And she has to get like minimal charge so that it'll work while plugged up. So that's where we're at right now. Okay, well, you can tell me later, Jason. Or you can tell me now. It doesn't matter. In fact, Jason, I'm going to go ahead and put you on the stage.